Hey guys, wanted to remind you before this video begins that I'm letting you choose the first Cloud Connection retrospective of 2022. Your choices are Sonic Adventure, Jet Set Radio, and Kirby 64 The Crystal Shards, and so far Kirby 64 is leading the pack, but that could be overturned very easily, so let your vote be heard if you want to change that. You can find the link to the poll in the description or the comments below, and again, do not comment your choice on this video, it will not count. As a reminder, all three of these games will get retrospectives at some point. This poll is just determining which one is getting a video in January. With that said, on with the video. In the ever-evolving video game market, it is becoming increasingly more difficult for a game to stand the test of time. What is considered innovative in one generation becomes tired and blasé in the next, and even if a game captures the hearts and minds of the entire industry, it isn't long before the next big thing comes along to take its place. In many cases, it's up to us, the players who consume and devote ourselves to these games, to help keep them alive years after they release. Far too often, a game will experience a golden age of popularity for a few years and then peter out into obscurity, perhaps maintaining a small dedicated fan community but otherwise leaving the limelight. Some games, however, simply refuse to die. Whether it be continued support from developers or a sizable player base keeping the game running, a handful of titles have managed to be preserved and given an almost immortal stature in the gaming world, for better or for worse depending on your viewpoint. These games shape the direction that gaming as a medium takes long after they launch, and their legacy becomes a legend in and of itself. And today's subject, an epic fantasy role-playing game and the fifth major title in a long-running series, is one of those games, an adventure that has been the subject of critical praise, adoration, memes, references, ridicule, and port after port after port. For 10 years, this behemoth has spread its influence across the gaming landscape, and in celebration of its 10th anniversary, it's time to dissect it. This is The Elder Scrolls V: Skyrim. In 1986, at his home in Bethesda, Maryland, software developer Christopher Weaver formed Bethesda Softworks alongside engineer Ed Fletcher. The company initially produced sports titles and tie-in games with the Terminator franchise, but in 1994 it would launch the first game in the Elder Scrolls series, Arena. Directed and produced by Vijay Lakshman, Arena was heavily based on pen-and-paper role-playing games which Lakshman, programmer Julian Lefay, and designer Ted Peterson loved playing. Arena took place in the land of Tamriel and allowed you to inhabit whatever role you wanted when designing their character, fully absorbing the player into Bethesda's world of swords and sorcery. Originally designed as an arena fighter, hence the name, the decision to transition to an open-world RPG would ultimately cement this franchise as one of the top role-playing video game series of all time. Becoming a mega hit for Bethesda, Arena led to the development of several sequels that aimed to create even bigger and better adventures. 1996's Daggerfall crafted a huge procedurally generated world, and 2002's Morrowind brought the series into 3D under the direction of Todd Howard, now the director of Bethesda Game Studios. By this time, many of Bethesda's founders and early developers had left the company, and Bethesda Softworks transitioned towards a publishing role, establishing Bethesda Game Studios to handle development. The company acquired the rights to the Fallout series from Interplay and would work on that franchise from Fallout 3 onward, but it continued to support their signature fantasy series with the fourth title, Oblivion, releasing in 2006. For the fifth game, which began serious development after Fallout 3's launch in 2008, Bethesda wanted to focus on Tamriel's northern province of Skyrim and create a story centered around dragons, a creature not seen in the series' lore except for the spin-off Redguard. With Todd Howard once again in the director's chair and lead designers Bruce Nesmith, Emil Pagliarulo, and Kurt Coleman on board, the team of around 100 people set out to bring the game to life. The impetus was to bring back the sense of discovery that Morrowind excelled at, as well as creating a more unique sense of culture rather than just representing the classic medieval fantasy tropes as Oblivion did. Addressing a complaint that the world of Oblivion was too flat and sterile in its environments, the level designers purposefully made Skyrim's terrain more difficult to traverse with mountains and hills aplenty. The game's creation engine, based primarily on the build of Gamebryo used for Fallout 3, allowed Bethesda to implement features like higher draw distance, detailed lighting, and dynamic weather systems. Skyrim was announced at the Spike Video Game Awards in 2010, with a release date set for the following year on November 11th, and the hype behind the game was immense. Upon its release, it immediately became a hit, selling 3.4 million physical copies within only 2 days, and reaching 230,000 concurrent players on Steam during its first day on the market. It would later go on to sell over 30 million copies by 2016, and considering how many times the game has been re-released since then, it's likely that number has grown much larger. It also received critical acclaim, and for the most part, both Elder Scrolls fans and newcomers alike loved the game. But when you have a game this massive, there's obviously going to be some pushback against it, and sure enough, just as there are people who love Skyrim for its world building and storyline, there are those who dismiss it for its bugginess, repetitiveness, and stale presentation. Regardless, it became a highly influential video game and helped establish the direction the industry would take for the next couple of years. Even today, you'll see games that seek to follow up on Skyrim's legacy, but is that legacy even deserved in the first place? That's what we're going to answer today. Now, before we continue, I just want to mention upfront that I'm not approaching Skyrim from the viewpoint of an Elder Scrolls fan. In fact, this is the only game in the series I've played to date. I'm looking at Skyrim from the perspective of the average gamer, the person who picked up the game when it was new because it was the hottest game at the time, as that was how I was introduced to the game myself. If any of my analysis comes across as redundant or incomplete to you Elder Scrolls fans, then I apologize for that. This is going to be a more general look at Skyrim and how it contributed to the path video games as a whole would take, and I want to be clear about that up front. With that said, it's time to find out why the game had such an impact and whether or not this 10-year-old beast still has any life left in it. Skyrim begins with the player character in binds, traveling in a horse-drawn carriage towards the city of Helgen, where you and your fellow prisoners are set to be executed by the Imperial Legion. The Imperials have made camp in Skyrim, land of the Nords, in order to stop the Stormcloaks, a rebellion movement, from opposing the secession of Skyrim from the Third Empire, the kingdom the Imperials serve. They've captured the leader of the Stormcloaks, Jarl Ulfric Stormcloak, alongside you and are all set to execute you, but as your head rests on the chopping block, a dragon named Alduin appears and lays Helgen to waste. You survive and begin an investigation into the return of the dragons, a species that has been virtually extinct in the world of Tamriel for eons. After fighting another dragon in the nearby town of Whiterun, you absorb the dragon's soul and learn a mighty power called a shout, indicating that you are the legendary Dragonborn. It's said that the Dragonborn can use the power of their voice to channel the spirit and language of the dragons, and that the Dragonborn will defeat Alduin and bring peace to the land of Skyrim. Skyrim epitomizes the open-world fantasy action RPG genre, which the Elder Scrolls has helped to define throughout its entire lifespan, and a lot of its features are emblematic of the evolution that the genre was experiencing back in 2011. You're initially confined to a small area that teaches you all the basics of movement, exploration, interaction, and combat before it sets you loose in the open world. This is far from new design, as games have been doing this basically since interconnected worlds were invented, and Skyrim's tutorial section, while competent at teaching the basics, forgoes any instructions on the finer details of building your character's moveset. This is done to ease the player into the granular mechanics later, and instead focus on the skills you'll be using heavily throughout the game. The escape from Helgen shows you how to move around and navigate the terrain, and it certainly feels intense despite it being a heavily scripted sequence of events. Tight movement and platforming is not the priority of Skyrim's gameplay, and as such, escaping from Alduin's attack only takes a short amount of time. The real bulk of this intro takes place in Helgen Keep, where you learn about the combat and dungeon crawling, but again, only the fundamentals. You might not want to specialize in melee attacks and swordsmanship, but since that's the easiest fighting style to get a grip on, it makes sense that Bethesda would show you about it up front. Not that you can't experiment with other combat practices right out of the gate, like two-handed weapons, archery, or magic, but those options are, at first, fairly limited. It's only once you make it through the keep that the game truly opens up to you in exploration, objectives, combat, and character growth. Skyrim's world is huge, and there's never any point after the opening that prevents you from going where you want to go. You're given the main objective straight away, but you have the freedom to completely ignore that and just explore. You might not be able to do much without having a sense of direction or an NPC pointing to where you should go, but the option is there for you to just lose yourself in the province of Skyrim once you make it past Helgen. The Dragonborn's adventure to learn about the return of the dragons will take them to the far corners of the map, with the player visiting a number of cities, strongholds, ruins, caverns, etc. as you move along the story. Skyrim's population isn't dense, but there are still plenty of people to talk to who sometimes offer up quests, jobs, or small tasks for you to complete. The quests themselves are more or less just a marker on your map, as you gain no experience points for turning a quest in. Instead, the reward is usually some gold or unique item given to you, advancement in the main plot or series of side missions, and or the loot you pick up along the way. Essentially, you're fulfilling your desire for material rewards by becoming a noteworthy presence, assisting the right people, or knowing how to relieve people of their valuables, such as by pretty speech, thievery, or aggression. And on that last note, let's talk about the combat, which, oh boy, is really starting to show its age. Skyrim is in a precarious position where it's trying to balance being an action game and an RPG, and it does so with mixed results. Battles take place in real time unless you're pausing the game to swap out your equipment or use an item, and there's little you can do to deplete the enemy's health besides using one of your combat skills. Depending on your build, you might have a number of melee weapons at your side, specialize in ranged combat with bows or destruction magic, or create various summons, status effects, buffs, and debuffs through conjuration, alteration, and illusion magic. But no matter what your character uses to attack, it's ultimately your ability to move around, dodge or deflect attacks, and strike enemies when you have the opportunity that's what matters. Skyrim's combat has little in the way of combo potential, essentially giving you one type of basic strike for each tool, perhaps letting you charge up a strong attack at the cost of stamina, and that's about it. That's where Skyrim's RPG roots settle in, as while the battles are heavily execution-based, there isn't a lot of depth behind throwing your punches. Factors like elemental resistances and critical hit chance do come into play, but dealing damage largely consists of clicking constantly with no real timing or pattern recognition required. The combat doesn't require a ton of skill, and sometimes having the proper strategy is more important than being dexterous. With enough mastery of your toolset, just about any build should be able to take down most threats, but I found the most effective way to fight is to balance a number of different combat styles to respond to what the enemy is doing or what abilities they have. That can be difficult to maintain though when you have to juggle upgrading several different branches of techniques at one time. Leveling up in Skyrim is based on developing individual skills, each of which gain points through repeated use of those skills in the field. Because the only way to seriously improve your abilities is through constant usage, the game encourages you to develop your core strength at every possible opportunity. This also helps you level up your character, which lets you both increase either your health, stamina, or magicka meter, and assign a specialized perk for the skill you're developing. Often these perks boost the effectiveness of a skill or unlock a unique ability or buff that makes that skill more versatile, though personally they aren't enough to make these fights any more exciting. The act of combat is not very thrilling, or hell, even challenging unless you turn up the difficulty, which just affects player and enemy damage rates. Yet it's this leveling system that keeps the battles rewarding, as in addition to looting the corpses of your fallen enemies, you're also honing the Dragonborn's abilities and progressing your character. Part of the job of any good RPG is to let you inhabit and live out the role your character serves, and while this is often difficult to achieve within the confines of a video game, Skyrim's measures in this regard are admirable. You're learning the techniques you want the Dragonborn to become proficient in as you play, and that goes a long way in making you feel invested in this fantasy world. But the other half of it, and perhaps the most important half, is how the world interacts with you and how real it feels. And this is the area where Skyrim's flaws are the most apparent. Skyrim doesn't take long to get its main story off the ground, introducing the threat of the return of the dragons immediately and revealing a healthy amount of information to you early on. You see the devastation that dragons can unleash and why they're a force to be reckoned with right from Helgen, and it's not long before you're fighting and killing your first dragon as it attacks Whiterun. Soon, dragons become rare spawns throughout the world and are no doubt your most dangerous foe, but once you've battled enough, it becomes second nature, a smart and organic way to indicate progress. You receive information on the dragons from a number of different sources, as there are plenty of groups and factions operating in Skyrim, some of which the Dragonborn can even join. Some are there mostly for story reasons, teaching you a valuable ability or directing you to the next major location. For example, there's the Greybeards, who teach you in the way of the voice in order to refine your shouts, and who purposefully isolate themselves at High Hrothgar, a temple located high atop a snowy mountain. They pride themselves on their wisdom and position of neutrality in Skyrim's politics, and they're generally respected by those in Skyrim. What's interesting about these guys is that they're regarded as masters of the voice, but they conduct themselves as if they were apprentices, putting up an unassuming front and never letting on just how powerful they are. While they want Alduin stopped, they are not in favor of a violent solution, as that would also destroy their leader, a dragon named Paarthurnax. There's also the Blades, a group of warriors sworn to aid the Dragonborn eliminate the dragons from Skyrim for good. They resent the Greybeards for not allowing the Dragonborn to attain their full power, but because there are so few of them left, it's hard for them to gain support. Because they rely on the Dragonborn to guide them, they have little in the way of resources and also remain steadfast that the dragons must be completely destroyed despite dragons like Paarthurnax opposing Alduin. The conflict between these two groups is explored a little bit, but I wish there was more attention on it, as there's never any incentive to choose one side over the other, since you'll need both of their help in the end. Other factions have their own quest lines and require more dedication to complete their stories, some of whom you meet through the main narrative and others whom you must seek out on your own. There's the companions from Whiterun, mercenaries for hire, who are well renowned for their skills as warriors and whose upper ranks are a circle of werewolves, which is actually pretty interesting. The Thieves Guild is a gang of criminals residing in the sewers underneath the town of Riften who take on devious tasks as requested by mysterious clients, the perfect faction for immoral stealth-based builds. The College of Winterhold is home to the most powerful mages in Skyrim who train themselves in the various arts of magic, which appeals best to those who specialize in magic-focused characters. The Dark Brotherhood is a guild of assassins who take on contracts from various people and is the token evil faction, as joining them requires you to kill without question, and they consider each other to be brothers and sisters in arms. The biggest factions impacting the story, and the ones you're exposed to right at the beginning, are the Imperial Legion and the Stormcloak Rebellion, who are both vying for control over the province of Skyrim itself. Skyrim is one of many regions under the rule of the Third Empire, which has been in power for over 670 years, but many in Skyrim believe that their country shouldn't have a non-centralized leader. Thus, the Stormcloaks have begun to mobilize against the Imperials, with the majority of Skyrim taking sides one way or the other. You'll find a lot of NPCs, especially in the cities, expressing support for either the Imperials or the Stormcloaks, often depending on where on the map you are. I actually think it's really clever that in addition to seeing both of the sides in action during the opening mission, the first city you visit, Whiterun, is a neutral territory that holds both Empire sympathizers and opponents, letting you hear both sides right up front. That's all just scratching the surface of what's happening in this world, but you Skyrim veterans may have noticed how lacking the footage has been for this side content up to this point. Truth be told, I've never finished any of the faction quests, and besides the main story, barely concerned myself with any of the game's quests. And the reason for that is simply because Skyrim's story, or specifically its method of storytelling, just does not work for me. Full disclosure, I'm not huge on high fantasy as a genre, and it's very hard for me to get into it, so I'm fully willing to admit that this might partially be because of my tastes and biases. But it's also because the narrative often falls apart if you aren't invested in the Elder Scrolls story or can't get into the plot surrounding the dragons. And that, unfortunately, includes myself. I want to like this game's story, and occasionally I do, but most of the time powering through Skyrim felt like a chore. Most of these quests have more or less the same structure. Find the character you need to talk to, find another character, get a task, grab some kind of item, maybe traverse through a dungeon, go back to the character, talk to them again, and quest complete. You could say that of a lot of games to be fair, but Skyrim is so obvious with its structure, usually never daring to stray far from the template it establishes very early on. Many of the locations, and especially the dungeons you travel to as part of the story, all look identical, with the same cavernous temple environments that are essentially indistinguishable from each other. When you are in a more unique environment, like seeing the ancient technology of the Dwemer in Alftand, or have a special condition required for the mission, like sneaking around the Thalmor embassy, Skyrim is much more interesting and manages to capture my attention. But this only happens every so often, and the majority of what you're doing is a boring, repetitive process. And even when you escape the main story by dealing with one of the factions, Skyrim still falls flat for me because most require a dedication to a specific skill set which you may not want to focus on, or an investment in a conflict that doesn't intersect with the dragon dilemma. Why should I care about winning the civil war for the Imperials or Stormcloaks when Alduin's reign of terror forces the conflict to temporarily halt anyway should it still be ongoing? Why should I join the Companions or the College of Winterhold when they have no impact on how the Dragonborn takes down Alduin? I apologize if it seems like I'm skimming over content you enjoy, and I honestly hate brushing it aside like this, but I had absolutely no motivation to see what these groups had to offer and only pursued them as far as I needed to capture footage of them. It isn't just the stories themselves that turn me away though, it's also how wonky Skyrim is when it comes to talking to people. The NPCs are so inorganically programmed that it feels like you're interacting with aliens trying to imitate normal human conversations. You know that trope in video games where characters will repeat the same lines to you over and over again when you speak to them? Well, at least in most games, they only do this when prompted via button press, unlike in Skyrim where they'll just blurt something out to you when you come within earshot of them, which is annoying when they only have 2 or 3 things to say and/or you're in a large crowd of people. Outside of scripted sequences, the characters don't talk to each other either. It's only you, the Dragonborn, they seem interested in chatting with. I get that creating dynamic conversations for all the characters wandering around is a waste of resources, but considering how often you're in populated areas, it becomes a constant aggravation, especially from the city guards. I'm actually kind of amazed that not once during my 21-hour playthrough of the main campaign did any guard give me the arrow to the knee line, although I did get plenty of what is it dragons along the way. But nothing takes me out of the experience more than when Skyrim begins to bug out on you, and this game has its fair share of jank. I didn't encounter any game-breaking glitches, but I found plenty of odd little quirks and errors that completely ruined whatever mood the scene is trying to establish. These usually come from the NPC scripts not knowing how to respond to certain stimuli or just activating in a weird spot, like this graybeard spawning right in front of me as I was talking to Master Arngeir. My favorite by far was Parfanax landing to talk to me, immediately flying into the air again, then initiating the conversation as he soared away in this silly little corkscrew. I can laugh at things like this now, but this just goes to show that despite how much time and effort you can spend on a product like this, it can still turn out a little half-baked. Bethesda games have a reputation for being more glitchy than others, and I suppose that's true, but while this game's progression doesn't often suffer because of it, the story it's trying to tell does. But if that narrative can't get you invested, is there anything that can? Well, yes actually. In fact, despite all the game's faults, there's one aspect of Skyrim that shines just as bright as it did 10 years ago, and that is how you integrate yourself in the game's world. To explain this point, I want to start right at the beginning with the character creation system. This element was simplified from previous Elder Scrolls games with the removal of the class system, ensuring your base stats and abilities weren't significantly altered at the start except for race-specific benefits. Your character is defined early on almost entirely by how they look, letting you discover the skills you want to focus on later in your playthrough and giving you the chance to experiment with potential builds. Some prefer choosing what to specialize in at the start, and longtime fans already know which playstyles they'll enjoy above others, but consider the perspective of someone who hadn't played an Elder Scrolls game before. Choosing what combat styles, weapons, and skills you want to learn takes significantly longer than deciding what your character should look like, and since characters are often an extension of ourselves or a role we want to inhabit, the visual appearance is more important to establish right away. I personally prefer using one-handed weapons, blocking, and light armor while having archery and destruction magic to augment myself in combat, and also investing points into alchemy and lockpicking outside of battles, and so chose the Redguard race to complement those skills. That made it more impactful when a character commented on my race. Even if it's just a small acknowledgement that I'm a Redguard, it's a good way for the game to reference the choices that you made for your character. You see this as soon as you leave the character creation screen, with Hadvar commenting on your race and where they come from before your execution begins, and if you listen to them all back to back, you notice how his tone of voice changes to reflect his opinions on your kind. It's small and obvious, yes, but things like that go a long way in establishing the state of the world and how its citizens feel about each other. But honestly, Skyrim is at its best when you're not interacting with people, as I was very surprised with how captivating the game is when you're completely alone. This is a huge setting and it requires a heavy amount of traveling, which, while some might call it unnecessarily tedious, provides the game's best examples of atmosphere, wonder, mystery, and tension. There's a lot of vast empty space in Skyrim, as while it is a fairly developed region with plenty of urban areas, there's a lot of untamed wilderness and places where the terrain is too mountainous to build cities. Bethesda deliberately built Skyrim's world with plenty of cliffs, hills, and mountains that made it sometimes difficult to navigate. I mean, it is entirely possible to just brute force your way up these steep slopes, and in fact it's pretty fun doing this, but the intent behind it is to force you to seek passage around these areas and explore the rest of the world. And that's a proposition that appeals to me because when you're venturing into new territory, whether via the main roads or off the beaten path, the world is such an inviting one to experience. The environments are very diverse, with each section of the map having its own flair to it, both in the geographical and topological details and the biomes and habitats each area shows off. Combined with Skyrim's weather system and dynamic skyboxes, it makes wandering through even previously explored lands exciting because the view is constantly changing and showing you something new. Despite the game being 10 years old and even disregarding its graphical shortcomings like aging models and stiff as boards animations, these environments still look absolutely gorgeous after all this time. It's partially because of how varied the locations look that makes Skyrim feel like a lived-in world, not one forged by a team of artists, but by its inhabitants shaping the world over eons as they adapt to its contours. The other major aspect that contributes to this feeling is the game's development of atmosphere through noise, both in the sound design and the music by Jeremy Soule. Skyrim's ambient sound design delivers an impact as soon as you boot up a save file, as no matter where you are, the world around you is brimming with auditory delights that appeal to the senses. Whether it's the wind brushing past your neck, the buzz of insects, the distant sounds of fire and city bustle, or the rain hitting the trees, something about the audio just makes you feel right at home in the world. I have to give major kudos to audio director Mark Lampert and the rest of the sound team because their contributions make for a hugely important, though often understated, part of the experience. Skyrim's soundtrack combines a full orchestra and choir with other traditional instruments like piano and guitars, as well as pads that sound like they're derived from real instruments. The game cycles through select tracks depending on where you are, what time of day it is, and what you're doing, meaning that a song won't help define a specific moment, but rather a specific mood. Skyrim's battle themes have a crushing impact with its short stings and hits, and bring in the percussion to mimic the hammering motions of combat. By contrast, in towns, you're treated to softer music that's meant to be more restful and welcoming, making you feel relaxed as you enter an area that's supposed to be safe and comforting. But my favorite tracks by far are the atmospheres that accompany you when you're traveling outside, especially at night. I am a sucker for ambient music, and these tracks, which often eschew concrete melodies in favor of sustained chords and drones, are an absolutely fantastic accompaniment to wandering this land. It's these moments where you aren't immediately focused on your quest or trying to court the favor of a faction that Skyrim really shines, and that's not something I was expecting to discover. In every moment where you have time to breathe and collect your thoughts, the game becomes a soothing, damn near therapeutic experience. There's a lot of words I associate with Skyrim, and not all of them are positive, but one that sticks out in my mind the most is cozy. Skyrim's world is like a blanket that you wrap around yourself when you want to escape into something and block out everything else, and just staring at the scenery provided me with so much satisfaction that on some levels, the rest of the adventure didn't even matter. This is still a video game, and I judge it as such, but when you strip away the plights of Tamriel and the war against the dragons, what you're left with is a fantasy world that still has the power to suck you in. And that, above everything else, is what makes this game still so impressive a full decade after its release. Skyrim's massive success ensured that the game would remain in gaming's collective consciousness for years to come. It obviously made a fortune for Bethesda and gave them the final push towards becoming a top-tier force in the industry after making headway with Oblivion and Fallout 3. If you didn't know Bethesda's name before it launched, you knew it after Skyrim, and with that kind of impact, it makes sense that the company would stoke the Skyrim fires to keep it burning for a long time, and to say it did just that would be an understatement. Bethesda developed 3 expansion packs for Skyrim, releasing them through 2012 and into 2013. The first, Dawnguard, centers around a mad vampire king who seeks to blot out the sun, and players have the choice to side with either the vampires or a group of vampire slayers known as the Dawnguard. The story culminates in the same way no matter which faction you swear allegiance to, though the sequence of events leading up to it is unique as you're exploring a different perspective. Speaking as someone who's only experienced the Dawnguard path, I think it's a decent little campaign that somewhat suffers from not having enough development in the story as might be expected from a DLC pack. The second expansion, Hearthfire, greatly expands on the aspects of home building and marriage, letting you purchase a plot of land, build a house from the ground up, and even adopt children to live with you and your spouse should you have one. Full disclosure, I didn't try out any of this content simply because I had no interest in it, but for those who want the ultimate role-playing experience in Skyrim, this might appeal to you. Dragonborn is the final expansion, which sends the player to the island of Solstheim after being attacked by cultists under the order of Miraak, the first Dragonborn who's gone mad with power. As of writing and recording this script, I actually haven't touched the Dragonborn DLC yet, so I'm going to let future Cloud Connection put up a little text box here to let you know what I think of it. Of course, I'd be remiss to talk about post-launch Skyrim content and not at least briefly mention all the various fan mods and patches. Bethesda has always been friendly towards modders, and Skyrim is no exception, giving players the ability to craft their own stories, insert new characters and mechanics, and balance the gameplay to their liking. You're likely already familiar with the more comedic mods like replacing the dragon models with characters from Thomas the Tank Engine or Randy Macho Man Savage, and those are undoubtedly great. But if you're the type of person who enjoys more serious fan mods, whose authors work to create immersive and lore-friendly projects, you'll find no shortage of them either. I didn't have the chance to test out any mods myself because I like to play through games unadulterated for videos, but even just casually observing them, I'm very impressed with Skyrim's modding community. These fan mods have kept Skyrim alive since its initial launch, not that the game necessarily needed help with that, as Bethesda absolutely refuses to let Skyrim pass on. In 2016, the company released Skyrim Special Edition, a remastered port for the PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and Windows that features upscaled graphics and effects but no significant content changes. A Nintendo Switch port followed the next year, as well as a VR version designed for PlayStation VR, and then a standalone VR port in 2018. Then, after joking at E3 2018 about how many times it's re-released Skyrim, Bethesda announced Skyrim Very Special Edition for Amazon Alexa, an actual game that uses voice commands almost like a text-based RPG. Then, finally, Bethesda just recently launched Skyrim Anniversary Edition, which contains Special Edition, 500 mods from Bethesda's paid mod service Creator Club, and fishing, alongside porting the game to the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X. You've already heard the jokes about how Skyrim keeps getting re-released, and yes, it's true that Bethesda just won't let the game go. From a business perspective, it makes sense, as Bethesda makes a crap ton of money every time it gets a new port or version, and there's an argument to be made for not letting that cash cow go to waste too early. And to its credit, considering that millions of people are still playing the game every month, and it remains a top-selling game on most platforms, there's certainly a benefit to keeping it as alive as possible. But on the other hand, it indicates how Bethesda is unwilling to let go of its golden goose and move on to something new. We know Elder Scrolls 6 is in development, but between the company's continued insistence on re-releasing Skyrim, while Fallout and Elder Scrolls Online continue to grow, and a brand new IP, Starfield, is set to release next November, it's unlikely we'll be seeing it anytime soon. Undoubtedly, it will be a daunting task to follow up a juggernaut like Skyrim, and tempering potential fan disappointment might be preventing Bethesda from showing us more until it's absolutely ready. After all, how do you top what is undoubtedly one of the most influential games of all time? For years after its release, Skyrim was pivotal in shifting the gaming landscape towards newer trends and helped make a lot of what are now mainstream staples popular. From its sprawling map to its emphasis on exploration and non-linear level design, Skyrim laid the template for open-world RPGs going forward. And it's the freedom to do whatever you wanted, to just shrug off the story and mess about for as long as you please, that demonstrated how building a giant fantasy playground for players to just walk around in both pleases the audience and is commercially successful. Skyrim isn't the origin of many of its tropes. You can trace a lot of its roots back to games that came out years, even decades before it. But this game helped codify so many principles that modern games follow today, and even if it wasn't constantly being shoved in our faces by its developer, its grip on the gaming world would still be felt. Think of how many fantasy open-world games have been released since Skyrim, and how, had it not been for just how popular that title was, they might have attracted very little attention and fallen off into obscurity. In short, Skyrim refuses to die, no matter how much ridicule and criticism it gets. Its time in the spotlight will end someday, and there may be a point in the future where we can look back on Skyrim and say, wow, remember when that was the cornerstone? Already we're seeing developers trying to escape the Skyrim trap, to avoid being redundant to what was accomplished 10 years ago. But its influence over the industry has given Skyrim a second meaning, as it isn't just a fantasy RPG, it's a game changer. At the end of the day, whether you or I like Skyrim or consider it an overrated piece of garbage doesn't even matter that much. Certainly I like parts of the game, though its numerous gameplay flaws, buggy nature, and uninteresting narrative does bring it down for me, and I consider myself more mixed on Skyrim than anything else. But that doesn't discredit just how much of an impact this game's had on the video game landscape. I couldn't do that even if I wanted to try. You can condemn Skyrim as a glitchy, boring mess, and you certainly have a case for that, but the fact is, millions of people love this mess, not just the people who play games, but also the people who make them. Skyrim is a pillar in the video game industry, and while we will eventually grow past it, for the time being it is an essential game, if not to play, then to study, to pick apart and notice where it's left its claws. It isn't for everyone, and it has tons of problems, but it is still a tour de force in this rapidly changing medium, and the fact that it's managed to survive for this long might just be a sign of quality in and of itself. Hey, thanks so much for watching this video. If you liked it, give it a like, leave a comment, and be sure to subscribe and click that bell to be notified when I upload something new. If you haven't already, consider joining the Cloud Connection Discord, the link is in the description. Bye everybody!